Denial of service protection profiles. Okay everyone, so in this video we're going to take a look at DOS protection profiles on the Palo Alto firewall. DOS, we know, very common type of attack where purpose of this particular attack is to limit resources or stop from providing services because it has been overwhelmed by requests. Most of the time, there's a flood of requests coming down interface of the end, or the end device is not able to keep up with the demand of traffic flow. In this case, either it can be in multiple sessions, hundreds or if not thousands of sessions open in a matter of a second, and that will basically run out the TCP session stack and it will exhaust available sessions for legitimate users. There's many types of DOS attacks, and in the Palo Alto firewall we need to configure a DOS protection profile, and the way it works is you configure a protection profile, and if you can see here on my slide I have the outside, which is resembling our internet, and we have our attacker, in this case the user that is coming from this particular IP, and he's about to do a teardrop, and most of the time it's not just one. We usually experience this type of attack from a botnet, or this is basically a farm of machines that are hitting your same target. So in this case it's a distributed denial of service. Multiple machines are targeting a specific resource from the outside in this case, or it can be pretty much anywhere on the net. You'll have a bunch of requests coming in from multiple machines, and your appliance will not be able to keep up, so it will drop traffic. So we configure a DOS protection profile. The way it works is we create a profile object, and the profile object we're going to put some thresholds. So we're going to say, well, I'm going to allow X amount of connections per second. If I go over that, consider that a DOS attack, and apply the enforcement. So we're going to see the type of enforcement that we can apply, which is basically drop or protect, and you're going to see the difference between both of them. And then we're also going to discuss what is an aggregate DOS protection profile and a classified DOS protection profile. So basically an aggregate is you're applying this particular object that you're creating to a zone or interface, and regardless what's the traffic that is flowing, it's going to be applied globally. So any traffic whatsoever will be applied against this particular DOS protection profile. So there's no specific attribute that we're looking for. You just apply it, and as an aggregate, and it will detect all traffic and it will enforce all traffic regardless of individual IPs, so on. Classified is the opposite. So classified, you specify how do you want to classify the traffic, or what are you looking in the traffic, and then match against your protection profile. So if it hits your threshold, then it matches the profile, so then it gets applied based on the rule. So you can classify based on source IP, destination IP, or you can do both. So we're looking for a specific source IP, or we're looking for that source IP and the attack type or the threshold that has been violated, and then we apply the policy upon that, and we decide what we want to do. And obviously we apply the policy to a zone or to an interface. We can select that, and we'll take a look at that in a second. And this basically example is a very common scenario. We got an attacker or a bunch of attackers or a bunch of machines that are basically a botnet. This group of machines are all targeting the same destination. In our case, we have a web server sitting on the DMZ. This is the public IP, and basically we're getting this attack, hitting this IP, which then gets forwarded onto the real IP, which is the 10.100.0.10. And then if we don't do something about it, for example, they might be exhausting the HTTP request, so that's TCP, and I'm just overflowing that TCP request. So what's going to happen with the web server is that it will drop concurrent requests, because it's going to say, well, I don't have any more sessions available, I'm going to drop. And that's basically a denial of service. Okay, so let's go ahead and configure the DOS protection profiles, and let's apply it to our outside to inside zone, or in this case the outside to DMZ, and we'll go from there. Okay, so once we're in the Palo Alto, we're going to take a look at policies, and the last option, it's DOS protection. So this is where you apply the actual object. We need to create the object, and this will be the DOS protection profile. And once we have the profile with the settings and the thresholds that we want to enforce, then we go over policies into DOS protection, and we apply it into the direction we want to. So in this case, we want to apply it from the outside to the DMZ, or if your environment is going outside to inside, then you'll have the DOS protection profile apply that way. So, okay, so let's go ahead into objects. And then in objects, over security profiles, the last option, DOS protection. Okay, in DOS protection, we're gonna click add, and we're gonna create our first profile. Okay, so I decided to label this one as Corp DOS Protect Aggregate. We're gonna do two profiles. We're gonna do a classified profile, and we're gonna do an aggregate profile so you can see the difference. Okay, in the window, we have two options. And again, you can see here is a type as aggregate or classified, and this one will be aggregate. The first tab shows flood protection. So this is the type of flood or the type of traffic we want to, protect our environment from a potential DOS attack. SYN flood, we can enable SYN, and if you can see here, the action is random early drop. You got two options, SYN cookies or random early drop. We're going to be doing random early drop. So it's going to detect, and before it actually hits or enforces, it will drop the traffic and it will not allow that to hit our destination. And we have our thresholds. We got a threshold of 10,000 concurrent connections a second. If we go past that, that means that treat it as a DOS attack and enforce the policy. Activate rate, same. So if you see, you can say, well, I want a threshold of 9,000. So we can say our threshold is 9,000. So hey, start triggering an alarm because we're hitting the threshold, but then actually enforce if it goes over 10,000. So you have the rate, the alarm. So let's start monitoring everything more closely because we're now getting close to the threshold. If we hit the 10,000, we're actually applying the policy. And we have a max rate of connections of 40,000. If I go over 40,000 concurrent connections a second, then drop as well. So we have this activate threshold and we have a maximum connection threshold. And we're blocking for 5 minutes or 300 seconds. If we go to UDP, it's very similar. We can enable UDP, and this will be the alarm rate and activate rate and max rate. So ICMP, if we're doing ping of that, if we're doing an ICMP type of attack, again, we have those thresholds and we have the duration. It's very, very similar. And then finally, IPv6, ICMP, and any other type of IP flood, we're gonna set those thresholds, and we'll leave it as default for our demonstration. Resource protection. We can also say, well, I don't want to have more than X amount of concurrent connections or sessions, then I can enable resource protection. So if someone keeps sending an infinite amount of sessions to be established to our end device or our end application, then if I pass this threshold, I'm going to drop the traffic. I'm going to consider that a DOS attack. Okay, so we'll press OK. Once we have the first one, we just need to make the second one exactly the same thing. The only difference will be that it will be classified, and we're classifying to a specific attribute, and you'll see that in a bit. And the second one will be labeled the same thing. The only difference is classified. Okay, and now we're going to select classified, and we're going to enable the same. Or better yet, let's do it different on this one. I'm going to say that the threshold will be 20,000 from a specific source, or in this case, if it matches the source IP. So UDP flood, we're going to leave this in default, ICMP default, and other IP. And we're also enabling resource protection. We'll click OK. And now we have both. We got the aggregate, we got the classify. Aggregate applies to all traffic regardless of source IP or destination IP. Classify applies to a specific type of traffic, and you're going to see that in a bit. Let's go to policies. Now we go to DOS protection, and we're going to make two policies. We're going to make an aggregate policy that it will be enforced against all traffic regardless of source or destination, and then we'll do another one which is classified. First one will be DOS protect aggregate. Well, we can select either zone or interface. I can grab my outside interface. If I want to apply it to multiple interfaces that are belonging to the same zone, I can then select the zone. In my case, I'm going to add it to the zone. Okay, and my source zone will be the outside because my attacker comes from the outside. Any source IP and any user. So let's go ahead and click on destination. And we're going to select DMZ, destination. And now, this is what we can do. We can say any service, regardless of what type of service, or I can be specific to what service is being affected by this DOS. In my case, I'm just going to leave it as any. And my rules are either deny or protect. Deny, as long as you match the policy, deny the traffic. If you actually match the condition, I want you to protect. else, let it go through. And allow, obviously, is allow. In our case, we're going to set as protect. So protect basically is going to say, unless you match the specific attribute that we're looking for, we're going to enforce. As a matter of fact, let's do aggregate deny, so it applies globally. Schedule, you can put a schedule. When do you want to have the policy enforced? You can lock the activity of this particular policy to your external logger. And then aggregate, we're going to apply, this is where we actually apply the DOS protection profile, okay? And then we'll press option, and we're going to say any here, and we're good to go on the first one. And then finally, we're going to do the second one. And the second one will be exactly the same thing, but it's going to be specific to our source IP, okay? Now we go to source, same source, destination, same destination, option, we're going to leave as any. And in this case, I want to protect. I want to verify that it matches my classified policy or profile, and then take the action of protect the environment. Aggregate, we can actually do both. And I will strongly recommend to, have them separate, because then it will hit a little bit more CPU resources or hardware resources on the unit, because it's going to do aggregate, but also it's going to start checking one by one. You don't want to hit your CPU usage or your hardware usage on the firewall. So let's leave it as none. And then on profile, I'm going to select classify, and this is where we can select the attribute that we want to classify the traffic as. In my case, I'm just going to leave it as source IP only. We'll press OK. And done. Okay, so in a summary, we got two policies. We got the source zone going to our DMZ, and we're matching against both profiles that we created previously. So if we go into DOS protection, we got two profiles. We got aggregate and classify. Aggregate applies to all traffic regardless of source IP or destination IP, and classify applies to a specific address attribute. In this case, we select on our policy to be source IP. And that is it. Make sure that you have your settings. And again, this is something that it will differentiate, or it will be different based on your environment. This is not a set and forget. You gotta identify, or you gotta analyze how your application behaves. And then based on that, you can then decide how to create those policies and apply them to the right interface. Okay, and that's it. DOS protection, it's something very useful and very much needed these days. So make sure that you apply it, and you should be good to go. Okay, everyone, so we reached the end of section 5. Now we're going to begin section 6, high availability firewall clustering and virtual systems. Thank you for watching.